Thank you very much for listening to Happy Times and Places. It's a positively inclined Doctor Who episode commentary podcast in which I, Toby Hadoke, have asked a friend to choose a Doctor Who story and to nominate their favourite things about each instalment. I have to watch, and guess what they are?
Hi, I'm Ruben. I'm a Doctor Who fan. I'm picking The Green Death. It's the beginning of the end of the Unit family era and such a sweet goodbye to Joe Grant.
Well, welcome everybody. It's time for episode 5 of The Green Death. And I was musing last time about, the power of the mushroom fungus to destroy green chemical waste and the death that it bestows. Bestows is the wrong word. I suppose you can bestow death if it's a mercy killing, but the death it infects the Welsh mining community with, like a metaphor for industrial, the commercial destruction of industry. That is, ironically, the colour of the ecology movement. We associate green with good, don't we? If you are a green, you are somebody that is, pro the ecology in the way that nature usually has the answer. But this is a green death. This is most inconvenient. This is the just stop oil of greenery. So I say that as I record this. There seems to be a schism. I myself think persuasion is the best way. I sympathise wholly with the cause of trying to improve the way that we use this world's resources. However, I think annoying people into your way of thinking is a long road, and long roads use more petrol and diesel, and one that ends, I think, with a fork where the person you're trying to persuade, go in different directions. But then again, I'm a whoopsie and always one for arbitration, and probably end up not, being courageous enough to put my foot down. So who am I to talk? What I do is I drop in observations about television episodes we've all watched many times and hope to make them interesting and have the odd joke. But occasionally I will try to pass comment on an issue of the day and end up being in a bit of an equivocator. But I'm definitely sympathetic to the green cause, not only because of Doctor Who and the Green Death, the ecology story, but because the Ecology Party was named the Ecology Party at the suggestion of a Doctor Who actor, John Abineri, who is not in the Green Death, but he is in a few stories' time in Death to the Daleks. Anyway, what am I doing? Yes, well, I was musing on the power of the vegetable, on the power of the mushroom. Well, never mind the mushroom. I am currently nursing a bruised toe because I dropped a potato on it. We get our potatoes from an organic shop up the road. So they're organic potatoes made of stern stuff. And, of course, these things come in paper bags that are worse than useless, but they make you feel like they're brown, so they're wholemeal bags. It's wholemeal paper. It makes you feel like it's good for you. And of course I picked up the bag, and it was going, I'm not withstanding 4 potatoes, and one of the potatoes landed on my toe, and it seemed somehow managed to get under the toenail. So I was picking bits of sort of skin and dirt. It's a dirty potato. That's what organic means. It means dirty. It means we can't be bothered to wash it. And got right under my toe, but also the force of it bruised my toe. So if you think a mushroom can't cure the Green Death, a potato can certainly smash a toe. And in fact, I had an idea that, should I ever get... should we ever get burgled or something like that, I could put a few potatoes in a sock and do a Ray Winston on Phil Daniels, but not snooker balls, but potatoes. But anyway, it's not to be. let's anyway, let's crack on. I was going to say, yes, the amount of damage you can do with a potato. I've actually just really hurt my shoulder just because I'd sunk a bit in the sofa and decided to sit up straight in order to record myself properly, and because posture is quite important, but also I need to be in a good position and sort of comfortable for the next 25 minutes. And also, I don't want to destroy the sofa cushions because I get into trouble for that if I lean into them too heavily. And I've really hurt my shoulder, so I don't need the force of a potato. It's just my ancient creaking body that doesn't stand up to much. But let's see what episode 5 of The Green Death can stand up to. Can it stand up to the test of time, to scrutiny, and from changing, priorities and attitudes in the political and landscape, and the interests of storytellers? I think it's still quite relevant, and it's been standing up well so far. And it also has that wonderful cosy nostalgia that I'm learning to love about Doctor Who, perhaps more than I ever have before, when I've always had an eye on it impressing strangers and being hard and tough, when actually there's nothing to be ashamed of, that I find something comforting and enjoyable. Comforting and enjoyable as marauding, mutated maggots produced by grasping, avaricious capitalists can be. Okay, let us go and watch episode 5 of The Green Death in 3, 2, 1. It's solid, isn't it? This music and this title sequence. I know I sort of have to allude to it every time, and it's lovely how the quality is. I love the fact that you can see every sort of wrinkle on Pertwee's face, and just the colours. It's just simple and yet really effective, and I think more effective because it's abstract. And I've said that a lot. So we're going to have to get used to some of these scenes between Benton and the Brigadier not being external and on film, but being in the studio, and which is an interesting mix. It's a bit like the Slitheen, isn't it, in Aliens of London, World War III, where Russell T Davies said one of the first lessons they learned was not to have a monster done two ways, not to mix a suit with CGI, because obviously the CGI Slitheen move like athletes and the suited ones move like wobbly rubber beasts, and one draws attention to the other, and I would say that that's sort of the case here with the Brigadier and Benton, is that because these scenes here on film suddenly relocate to the studio later on, it does draw attention to the fact that you're missing what you get here, which is the wind in their hair and the genuine sort of feel of the film and the browns and everything like that. But I'd long thought of this as a mistake. In fact, I'm sure when it was first written up, it was they ran out of time on film and these scenes had to be mounted in the studio. And it was Richard Bignell, font of all Doctor Who wisdom and knowledge, who pointed out to me that no, actually, it had always been planned that way. You establish that they're outside in your limited filming days, and then you hope that the audience will do the work with you and go, okay, they're in the same place, but they're doing it like that now. I mean, you couldn't do that these days. It would be, you couldn't have, I can still spot green screen, but I think even could even my mum spot green screen of that kind? I think she probably could. I don't know. But it was blue screen or yellow screen in those days. But CSO, let's call it for those days. But you couldn't get away with it now. As I say, I can still. I don't know. Can you do it? I'm quite good, I think, at spotting when something's been green screened. I'm also pretty good at spotting a bit of ADR when a line's been added. Even within a scene or changed. I think I have an eye and ear for that sort of thing, which is I'm not parading a skill here. I think it's just from watching lots of television and being attuned to sort of how it works and interested in that side of things. It doesn't help, sadly, because obviously the best way to enjoy television is to be actually consumed with the story that you're being told, and the truth of the acting, and the truth of the writing, and the truth of the character. It's almost peeking behind the curtain has its advantages. You get the extra joy of going, oh, I've worked out how that was done, or that this was done on a different day, or that was an insert. I quite enjoy putting that sort of archaeology together, but it must first and foremost come from being able to enjoy the story on the storyteller's terms. I don't I'm not one of those, I like catching people out, I like looking for goofs. I don't actually enjoy that, and I get annoyed when people are desperate to find such things, because you're then not watching the program that's been made. You're not allowing the filmmakers, the television makers, to work within the parameters and limitations that you obviously have to work. You could pick holes in anything. You could say, well, nobody actually talks like people talk on television. Nobody goes to the loo, blah, 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 all of that sort of thing. But you have to. I think you have to take a slight step away and go, but I can still, like one can with great Shakespearean acting, if it's the truth, one can forget that one's sitting next to somebody who's eating a lemon sherbet, and that there's curtains in the wings, and that the actors are clomping on a cross arch or whatever. It's the truth, it's the story, and you have to come to it. Now here we are on CSO. This doesn't look as bad to me. I do love these long shots of the maggots on the slag heap. There's something very evocative and sort of grey, slaty 70s about it, and it's always nice to see a helicopter. The money's on show, and they do that very well. But the Brigadier and Benton are with two extras who are quite interesting, because he says, hopefully, because one of them is, and this is great, I love all this, I love a 70s explosion. The 80s explosions get quite glittery, and they things blow up, whereas they're nice and orange and smoky. I would actually venture to say the explosions of Doctor Who in the 1970s are Doctor Who's best explosions. I don't think you ever quite get explosions like this again. These are all they were quite incendiary as well. There's quite a lot of fire with those, but they know how to do good orange smoke with the 70s explosions. So I like all of that, and I like they're charging around location. You've got mud and you've got water, and it's all pretty sort of real, But yes, the extras to represent all those unit soldiers on location, where you get two extras sort of acting away busily behind Benton and the Brigadier, John Levine and Nicholas Courtney, and they are David Biller, who is the blonde one, who you start to spot in loads of things because he's got a shock of blonde hair. He's one of the two Time Lords that gets killed in episode 10 of the War Games, and he's a Thal in Genesis of the Daleks. He's good for Thal because he's got the blonde hair. He died a couple of years ago, sadly, but he is interviewed on that I Was a Doctor Who Monster video. I call it video. It's on DVD now, but I had the VHS because it's right up my street, interviewing actors who play monsters in Doctor Who. I think that's a lovely video from Real Time Pictures, one of my favourites. It's because it's not. I find interview. He says, as a person who's done an interview podcast, I find interview videos with one person quite, I have to really be in the mood, whereas broken up ones with lots of different people, that's, I could do that loads of times. And the other extra in those CSO shots of the Brigadier and Benton is Leslie Bates, famous as Shadow of Cal, the first human to film for Doctor Who. Leslie Bates, his is the Shadow about 60 years ago, to the week almost as I record this. I think it was last week. And because I am recording this in October 2023. If you are not a patron, you'll be hearing it in 6 months' time. There's another brilliant extra, Pat Gorman, but we only see him for a second because it zooms in on an impassive Stevens. So, I mean, do you really come to this for the extra spotting? If you're so inclined, you've probably spotted them already. But anyway, Leslie Bates, who died less than 10 years ago, nobody ever thought to interview him. And I always knew he was Shadow of Cal, but actually when you look at his credits, he did loads and loads of Doctor Who's. There he is. He's in between Benton and the Brigadier there, and it's David Biller on the right-hand side, or my right-hand side. I never quite know how that works. If I turned round, he'd be on my left-hand side. He's the one that isn't between the Brigadier and I actually am really bad at how left. I do my left hand because I hold. You can when you have an L shape with your left hand. But if you told me to move my left or right hand, I would have to think about it. So I can spot extras at 20 paces, but basic human skills, I'm hopeless at. This is not something I'm proud of. Some people go, "Oh, I'm terrible at the things normal people can do," and I find that a bit sort of arrogant. Yes, aren't I slightly loftily otherworldly? No, I'm just shit at things I should be good at. And Pertwee is brilliant at all of this sort of stuff. Taking, the chips are down. He's got this bombastic computer, and Pertwee's also very good at countering sort of larger than life stuff with a sort of effete disdain or a very laid back dismissal. And there's actually a very nice dynamic there because you've got Boss being crazy, and I've talked over a lot of Boss's stuff, but I like the way the music accompanies Boss's speechifying, and I don't think Boss is tedious. I actually think this megalomaniac computer, partially because John Dirth has got such a wonderful voice. Although it's hard now in retrospect not to see Lupton from Planet of the Spiders. And because I think I came to Planet of the Spiders first, I always think of this as a sort of addition to his role as Lupton. But actually, this is his introduction to Doctor Who. He's Boss first, Lupton second, and it's actually quite nice that this. And I often sort of forget that it's John. It's the guy who's the lead villain in Planet of the Spiders is a sort of voice. I mean, it's still a big part, and it's it's not like he's a walk-on who's promoted to a speaking role. He's a leading guest artist, but you don't see him. And this is his introduction to Doctor Who. I think Jerome Willis is pitch perfect to this. I think what you want is really good actors, and I love the fact he gets slightly peeved with the Doctor. He's not a megalomaniac, he's brainwashed as well, but he believes it, or the brainwashing has made him believe it. But he's patient with Boss and slightly overwhelmed by him. He's peeved with the Doctor, but he also wants to sort of persuade, and he believes the stuff that he's trotting out here, as of course all good villains do. I've been watching in my downtime, of which I don't get much. I've been rewatching The Wire, which is this the first time The Wire has been mentioned while talking about the Green Death? I don't know, no, because people who like Doctor Who like good television. I'm sure there are Doctor Who podcasts where they talk about The Wire. You feel me? And one of the brilliant things about that is that, and there's many brilliant things about it, is that the characters are three-dimensional, and the baddies aren't just bad. They are people doing what they need to survive and doing. So there aren't any real baddies. Well, there are people on the wrong side of the law. That's an excellent shot, coming from the ceiling and then coming down into the Doctor's sort of cell. I don't know why Global Chemicals has a cell. Do you think any other sort of big businesses have a cell? Is there in Shell's head office? Is there a cell? I'm trying to think of a big company. Who are the people that do the tyres? I can't even. Michelin. Have they got a dungeon? So yes, and here's HR, here's accounts, and yes, just take the lift to go down to the dungeon and the punishment block. I actually quite like. It made me laugh the first time. Richard Franklin did that sort of comedy fall after being attacked by the Doctor, and the Doctor does say that it's horseplay. So it's not just the actor trying to be funny; it's actually Yates trying to be funny. Franklin is clearly having fun here, which I kinda vacillate with. I do like that sort of pratfall that he does. It is genuinely funny, but the sort of the hand rub that he does in the previous episode, I found a bit much, and you go, where's the line between the actor and the character? And because he's getting more to do than just sort of go, Brigadier, there's aliens on the beach or whatever, he's rising to the occasion. I, I just don't know if I feel he judges it perfectly all the time. But that might be being mean-spirited. I love this. I love any scene where somebody goes through a door or a descending gate, and the other person gets trapped on the other side and says, "Go, save yourself." It's like people sacrificing their lives when they're wounded in a spaceship that they crash into something to help everybody else escape. It's just the sort of thing that it's like somebody getting wounded and saying, "No, leave me." I actually said that once when I was playing my friend at Call of Duty, and he thought I was being ridiculous because I was doing so badly and I kept falling off this building. He said, I can't. We're playing a computer game." I always rue the loss of the milk here. I'm not into wasting food, even for television. Although, of course, milk is not the force it once was. Now we get milk from almonds and oats. I've never seen an almond with udders. And milk is... I remember when Thatcher was, Margaret Thatcher, milk snatcher. But now we question the wisdom of actually giving milk or drinking as much dairy. I believe that's the case anyway. I know we need our calcium. Betts, there we go. He's Betts. And we've had a Dix in a previous episode. So Barry Letzer. So it's all getting a little cozy and self-reflective. And I vacillate with that as well. I think a long-running show and long-running personnel have earned it. But the Doctor is on film. The Doctor is on film. Let us leave this place of videotape and join him in the land of film. But do we worry about self-reflection? It's a very British thing, isn't it, to go, are they getting fond of themselves? I think there's nothing wrong with taking pride in a job well done and being part of a long-running show and maybe acknowledging some of the talent. As credits guy, why should I object to a Dix and a Betts in the dialogue? I don't. I think I worry about how it might look to other people or how it might feel. I think one worries about the motivation behind it, don't we? We do that too much. I do that too much, and I don't like it when people do it to other people. Where somebody will do something, people will go, "Oh, they're just full of themselves." You go, "No, they might just be happy." You've imposed any sort of smugness upon them. I suppose I like the idea of Terence Dix and Barry Letts being above giving themselves an acknowledgement in a story because they're so pure. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. So I'm coming down on their side and having a go at any lingering doubts I might have in the back of mind without actually consciously thinking those lingering doubts, but I'm aware that they're there. The mind is a funny thing, isn't it? And we do that a lot these days. I'll just speak for myself, but I know I get annoyed when other people do it. As I say, when you see people making a judgment on why they think somebody has done the thing that they've done, when actually they might have just done the thing that they've done because they thought it would be fun and nice, and there doesn't have to be any conceitedness to it. Anyway, why did I talk about that, not Doctor Who? There was a model shot of Bessie there. That's the sort of thing that used to make me cringe. It's quite a mixture of resources here, isn't it? You have all the film stuff, but then we're here in the studio where you can definitely see the planks in the floor because, of course, it's a raised set because it has to be, because you have to be able to manipulate the maggots from underneath, and because it's a raised set, it's planks of wood, and of course between planks of wood fall scattered gravel or whatever, or certainly you can tell that it has gaps between it, or that it's not completely solid, and so it underfoot with big clumping John Levine's big feet. It is not like a proper slag heap would have been. Although it does have the line, "She's on got to the slag heap with the professor," which is a great line. So you've gone from outside to inside to model shot to inside pretending to be outside. It's a real demonstration of what they had to do to go, well, we're going to have to realise some of this in lots of different ways. And they don't quite marry together to a modern eye. But I think if you watched a lot of television at this time, you were just kind of used to it. You were used to occasionally a grassy knoll being a piece of astroturf and a blue black cloth. Although, by the way, and I must say I was wrong about the CSO in The Green Death being running out of time. I always knew that what has been written up as CSO in the Claws of Axos was actually Sky, and I was always annoyed when that myth has been perpetuated. The blue sky outside Bill Filer's car, and when Benton and Yates are fighting on the Land Rover, and it was just a very blue sky, but that's always been written up as, oh, they forgot to replace the backcloth, to the extent that Barry Letts even says that in the commentary, and it's wrong. It's actually the sky, and people don't make that mistake now because it's since been darkened a bit. Now, here we are. I always forget this bit. Why am I talking about the claws of Axos? I always forget Mike Yates appearing in the lab here. Remember last week I talked about forgetting about Mike being undercover. I always forget that he turns up and tries to kill the Doctor too. I don't know why, because I've seen this loads and loads of times, but it's always a kind of surprise. It always seems unfamiliar. And that's great because it means it remains a bit of a surprise. I suppose because we've only seen Mike in the global chemicals scenario. To have him here, he does seem like an interloper into a different part of the story. And I suppose that adds to the surprise and it adds to the danger because suddenly we've got the two worlds sort of combining, which makes this very tense. And I think it is very tense because, again, Pertwee is great at this sort of stuff where, you know, he's very good at that, you know, like the Major Baker, you are ill, you are very, very ill, at being very calm but very focused and and a man of authority in a tense and dangerous situation. He doesn't panic. But you can tell that underneath he's aware of the extent of the danger, but he knows what he's got to do. He's great at this sort of stuff, Pertwee. What a figure he is, and how wonderful that the Metabelis crystal, which was the sort of, you know, the fool's errand. Oh, and we have the Brigadier doing. Do you know what? I think that is funny. I do understand those who are disappointed with the Brigadier becoming a slight figure of fun, but Nicholas Courtney is so adorable. And here suddenly is Zippy from Rainbow out of nowhere. Isn't this great how they make this work? I mean, obviously it would be much better if it was Elgin, who we last saw being brainwashed. Now being an acolyte of Boss, which is what the brainwashing would have done. But Tony Adams is ill. And so he can't make it. And so we get this new character. I mean, in terms of how it's, you know, the last time we saw Elgin was him getting brainwashed, and you sort of go, well, that is a sort of natural end to the character. And in fact, it's probably better for him because we could say, well, he's been brainwashed and been relocated to the Slough branch of local global chemicals. And if he'd fallen ill 2 weeks earlier or a week later or whatever, it would have been a harder thing to cover. It's still not ideal, but I think it kind of works. But knowing what we could have had, that's another brilliant establishing shot using the set to sort of frame the characters. And I love that shot of Stevens. That's a brilliant piece of direction by Michael Brandt. He's really imaginative the way he's using some of these potentially fairly straightforward, you know, sets, office building stuff. And the set decoration, therefore, from John Burroughs, the designer, is very good. It gives him plenty of options for shooting the scenes. I like the way that Mike does this. I really like the way that Mike is proactive and having been, had his mind cleared, has to go back into the lion's den. That's very brave of Mike. I like it when sort of secondary hero characters, not one of the, Joe the Brigadier and the Doctor are the leads, really. So I always like it when Yates or Benton get something extra to do, because they're there to fulfill a lot of exposition and to give the lead somebody to talk to. So I like it when they have their own agency. Now, I got Andrew Llewellyn wrote to me on the Patreon page where the episode's coming out an episode at a time, and said, "You're forgetting the most important aspect of the fungus being the cure for the Green Death that I wanged on about last week." Plotline. I had the wanged on bit there. "Is that it taught us all the word serendipity. Sidney Newman would be proud." I hadn't forgotten, Andrew. It didn't happen last week. It happens this week. I was keeping my serendipity powder dry because serendipity was brought up earlier when I was talking about the claws of Axos, because I like to keep it relevant to the pictures. And it is indeed, and I remember Katie Manning then stars in a kids show, doesn't she, called Serendipity, which I've always thought was quite serendipitous in and of itself. But yes, I only know the word serendipity because of Doctor Who, and there are many, many more, and it is a beautiful addition to the fungus causing the cure. Is that it does give us that. It gives us as fans knowledge of that word. So hurrah for that. So yes, imagine this was Elgin, and Elgin dies, as he does indeed in the book. So Tony Adams ensured that Elgin could return. That's it. Tony Adams ensured that he could be interviewed on the Green Death DVD, where they do the Man Alive spoof, don't they? And they interview, although Stevens dies and they interview him, and Bert dies and they interview his brother. So they've got away with it. But nonetheless, I like to think that yes, it was Tony Adams going, well, if I don't die, perhaps I could be on a DVD spin-off spoof 20 years later. But it's good. It's nice to see Roy Skelton as well, doughty voice artist, voice of the Daleks, voice of Zippy. We don't often see his face. And again, I love this cliffhanger. Any cliffhanger that's a slight break from the norm, where again it's not one of the main characters. Although Yates is a regular, but Yates and Benton tend not to get cliffhangers. Not even the Brigadier. It's usually the Doctor and Doctor. I wonder why they didn't do voice of Boss. I think I prefer voice of Boss to Boss's voice. But anyway, and Barry Letts always said that he put the writer's name at the end because quite often people would tune in late and he'd feel that they'd miss the writer's credit if they missed the first couple of minutes. So that I remember asking Barry about that on one of my early commentaries and thinking it's probably a stupid question and he won't have an answer. And he did have an answer, so I was very pleased. I think that was on the Monster of Peladon commentary. Anyway, now the other thing is that was another upside down credit on episode 5, and I mused about that on one of the other episodes, and I got a message from my friend Peter Crocker, who knows about credits and things, and he says, I'm really hoping I haven't mentioned this already, but I don't think I have. Read the Green episode Upside Down Backwards credits film. The telecine apparatus used back then could only rewind film at normal play speed, not fast, and if the video was output, you got an inverted image, and of course it was in reverse because it was running the film backwards. Michael Bryant is unlikely to remember spontaneously, but if prompted, he may be able to corroborate my hypothesis, which is that if they were running behind in studio, they would have saved several minutes by running the credits over the film, then rewinding. I think 3 episodes run normally and 3 backwards inverted, so that makes sense. It does make sense, except you'd expect it to be every other episode, and that was episode 5, although they might not have recorded the episode endings in order, the episode credits in order. Who knows? But yes, that does make sense. So they're running them forwards and running them backwards and running them forwards and running them backwards. Interesting hypothesis. I should maybe try to ask Michael Bryant, who is an approachable sort of fellow. I actually saw him a few weeks back. But anyway, that's a thought for another day. But that's Peter's hypothesis, and he's the man who remakes the credits for the DVDs, so he's aware of their intricacies. So, what is my favourite thing about that excellent episode? It's an excellent episode. It has it all. Lots of lovely Mike Yates subterfuge. Lots of nice stuff with Stevens, who I think is a great villain. I think Boss and the way he's accompanied by the incidental music is fun. I didn't mention, I love that green death effect on Cliff Jones' neck. I think the green death effect is excellent. You come up with a story called The Green Death. You want the headline to be something that is well realized, and it really is well realized. The Green Death is clearly something they've worked out how to do very, very well. So it's a good job it's not called The Lift Down to the Mine or The Brigadier and Benton on the Bank, because they haven't quite managed to pull those off particularly well. Or Doctor Who and the Giant Fly. As we would definitely call Talons of Weng Chiang Doctor Who and the Giant Rat when I was younger. Did we call this one Giant Fly? And I was surprised it was Green Death. I always liked that the back cover had illustrations as well. There's a book to be written on, or at least a chapter, or at least a paragraph written on Doctor Who target novels with illustrations on the back as well as the front. So, what is my favourite thing of episode 5? I do like the bit I always forget where Mike Yates comes up from underneath the desk. And it's because it's always a surprise to me. But I shouldn't think Ruben will have chosen that, because it's a very personal one to me. I like the lighting, by the way, in that scene with Mr. James as well. The way that Michael Bryant shoots that prison cell is excellent, and the way that it is lit is very, very good indeed. I like Stevens as a villain. I like Boss as a villain. I think they complement each other very well. I think John Pert was excellent in that episode. Is it the Green Death effect? Is it the serendipity? Is it the fact that we learn a word? Is it that Reithian Doctor Who drive to be, to be educational, but not in a po-faced, boring way, but in a way that is just, augments, the thrilling tea time Saturday entertainment. Oh, I do love Doctor Who, so there's so many things to think about. This is a story that I've always thought a little overrated because of its production problems. I think I've always my teeth have always been slightly set on edge by the bad CSO and the mixture of realizations that have always caused me to sort of have a bit of a downer on it. And I think I always imagine the miners as being a bit sort of tougher, and people like this. As I say, I always imagine the 70s to be a bit more macho than it was in Doctor Who. Now, I'm not a macho person, and I don't particularly. Do I warm to macho people? No, I quite like it when I get a couple of my very close. I've got a very close friendship, although I don't see him as much anymore, but with an actor I worked with 25 years ago, and we were sort of chalk and cheese, and he's from a very sort of tough background and has lived quite a wild life, and I thought someone like him would have no time for a poncy, boring, slightly affected, nerky bloke like me. And actually I got on with him, and I got on with everyone on that show, but got on with him particularly well, and we still keep in touch, and he's still a mate, and I love his company. And yeah, I'm proud of that friendship, because it's one that it's obvious it's easy, it's easy to make friends with people you think are a bit like you. Do you know what I mean? And Francis is not that like me at all, and the fact that he likes me, I find very flattering. So I say but that's not to say he's macho, but he's genuinely, he's he can look after himself, I'm sure. But he's far too sensible. He's not somebody who struts around, because he would always, I'm sure, always avoid conflict first, because he's street smart as well. But so it's not that I'm, and I do know a few tough guys, and I think I get on okay with tough guys, because I respect them. So I'm not, I'm not averse to that, but I'm not drawn to the sort of macho world. But as I say, I thought Mike would be a bit tougher and a bit grittier. I thought Harry Sullivan would be. I mean, I love Harry Sullivan and I love Ian Marter, but I thought I didn't think those characters would be quite as tra-la-la as they are. I as I say, I'd expected it all to be a bit more Bodie and Doyle, and I think I'd expected the minor characters to be a bit more, spit and vinegar and grime, rather than, Bert's a bit sort of, isn't he? And I don't know. So I think that it was all a bit, perhaps slightly neutered for me from my expectation, where I expected everyone to be, because I grew up around farmers, where everyone was a bit sort of gruff and, grimy and, sort of pragmatic and, yeah. So, but that's none of that's actually the Green Death's fault. But I'm trying to articulate why, and I think I came into this story after reading the Doctor Who archives, where the fact file, did point out, that one of the newspapers had said that the dialogue was childish, and it pointed out that the CSO in the I was on the lookout for bad CSO, and bad CSO was there. I remember being quite disappointed with some of the effects, of course, because of what I'd imagined. Again, CSO was a particular bugbear, and the CSO, particularly on those scenes that I'd so looked forward to, of the millions of maggots in the green, with the Doctor and Joe going through it on the trolley thing. And being, I can't show this to my friends, and I'd imagined, Journey to the Centre of the Earth or whatever. But of course I was blaming it for what it was not. And I'm so much over some of that now. And instead I'm more admiring of the stuff that they do pull off than tense about the stuff that they don't. Because actually, time has been kind in the sense that all old telly looks old to the, in inverted commas, general public now. I remember doing a thing on this morning, and it was about Inspector Morse, which is all made on film and looks glorious, and is a high-end production, and saying to the presenter, Dermot Gavin, who's a gardener, and he said, "Oh yeah, I watched the Inspector Morse, and it's very slow, that old telly, isn't it?" I thought, God, if you're not a telly buff, anything that's sort of 5, 6, 7, 8 years old doesn't look like or sound or feel like what we watch now. Television ages quite quickly. And the fact that we still watch Doctor Who is a testament to it. And the fact is that, even high-end productions from the old days. Now, Inspector Morse isn't going to have bad CSO. But actually some of the performances are larger than I'd expected. I watched one recently. And it does have a much more languid pace than television today. But things that you don't think, well, Buffy the Vampire Slayer has dated in a way I thought it never would, because it was so modern. The X-Files, things date in different ways now, obviously, again. I think the way that affects, and the practical realisation of stuff, especially if it's all on film, is not going to beset a production in the way that Doctor Who is going to be beset by problems that it exhibits to the modern eye, who is used to much more uniformity. But nonetheless, I'd already started to read about the chinks in the armour of the Green Death before I'd seen it. And as I say, I remember that John Pertwee special where it said "Boss is tedious," but I think Boss is actually quite fun. But I think some of the practical aspects of the production and some of the sort of lightness of it in a way made aspects of it disappointing. Which means I'm probably enjoying it now, even though I'm talking through it. As much as I ever have, because this exercise makes me go in, and I'm not lying to you. I will never watch a scene and I will accentuate the positive. If there's a scene I think is awful, I might go, "That's awful, let's talk about something else." I mean, in fact, I talked about the Claws of Axos through lots of bits that I actually thought were quite good, because this is a stream of consciousness, and I have to try and finish a thought, because the worst thing is to leave threads hanging, I'm sure. I was working with the comic Robin Ince very recently for the 26th birthday of my comedy club, and he said as part of his set, that he realised he was a bit ADHD when, he'd come off stage. He was only doing 20 minutes the other night because that's all he had. We had to be out, and he normally does much, much longer. And he said, he'll come off stage and an audience will come up to him and say, "Look, here's the 13 stories you started and didn't finish. Can you at least finish 8 of them for us here and now, so we've got some closure?" And it is, it is quite difficult when you're commentating along, trying to be scene specific, to then not go, "Oh, well, I'll mention this and I'll get back to that thread that I dropped." And I'm sure there are quite a few of those. Look, that's the smallest violin playing for me, but for you as a listener, I hope it's not too frustrating. But going into this with this positive intent has really, I mean, I've never lost my love for Doctor Who, but it's rekindled my love for things I thought maybe I was too familiar with and not that bothered about watching again for a very long time, because because I've seen them all, and as I say, particularly with the Pertwee era, which I've always found slightly disappointing, slightly too long, the six-parters, not as produced, as well as they would have been had they been the films I was watching, or even stuff like The Professionals, which production values were always very high. And I'd always found them quite samey as well, I think. But I've really enjoyed the comfort blanket of the Pertwee era, which I think, and the ambition of it, what Letts and Dicks try to do in terms of the things they want to say. Although Terence Dicks would have poo-pooed that and gone, no, we were just telling stories, it was all an accident. Rubbish. You definitely reflecting what was going on at the times. But he wore it lightly, which is to his credit, because I've already alluded to the fact that how we doubt people, even dropping in a nice reference to their own name, go, oh, look at them getting full of themselves. No, they probably just thought it was fun. Anyway, so and Terence was certainly not. He could be. He could be quite disparaging about some of the stuff that came later, but he wore his own achievements very, very lightly, and was, a much more skilled artisan than he would ever have given himself credit for. Not maybe because he didn't think he was any good, but that wasn't his personality. He would, he would brush it off quite lightly and be dismissive that anything they did was in any way fancy or highfalutin. And maybe it isn't. Maybe it is disposable tea time entertainment, or that was its primary intent. But it has lasted because of some indefinable magic. But let's not cost time streams into one of my other podcasts. I know I've got to write a few of those. I've half written about 4, and I've got ideas for another 6. But they're harder to do than just talking rubbish out loud. Because if I want to, I can do 5 minutes about something I always knew about the claws of Axos. Now listen, what is my favourite thing about episode 5 of The Green Death? Now, I chose the Mike Yates stuff last week, which I'm slightly annoyed about because, of course, there is the Mike Yates surprise, which is that scene I always forget about, and there is the fact that the cliffhanger involves Mike Yates, and I love it when a cliffhanger doesn't involve one of the 3 leads. But I suppose, is it the use of serendipity? Is it the fact that they get an actor in to replace another actor because that was television in those days and you just have to do something clever? I mean, it's not particularly clever. They just change the name, but they make it work. It works. Knowing what we know now, we do miss that Elgin's story gets rounded out properly, but it works. It doesn't take the viewer out of it. I do like Stevens. I do like Jerome Willis, but I know he's got a moment I might single out next time. And I do like that establishing shot, Michael Bryant but Michael Bryant as a director has already been chosen by Reuben. Serendipity or the Green Death effect, I think. It is called the Green Death. Serendipity, that does sort of do so much of what Doctor Who is, but maybe I'm being skewed by the fact that Andrew told me I'd forgotten it when I hadn't. I was just not being premature in my serendipitousness. Premature serendipity. Now I think I'm going to go for the Green Death effect. It's only subtle in this episode. It's on Cliff Jones's neck, but it looks good. It looks like he's been infected by translucent green deathery. It's a very subtle effect, but it's very effective. And the fact that they can move the camera about and it not look pony, or not affect, it's an effect that doesn't require a static camera, which is unusual at the time. And it is what the story is named after, and obviously we do see it at other times. Front axial projection, isn't it? And it really works. I'm going to choose the effect of the Green Death as my favourite thing about an episode that has loads. And again, if I had my time again, I might have chosen Mike Yates's involvement, because it's actually much better in this episode. And I do like that pratfall he does. I do think that is very funny. That does make me laugh. So, Green Death. Ruben Herfindahl is going to choose something from episode 5. Will it be the effect of the Green Death itself? I don't know. Let's find out. My computer's just trying to deal with this. It's not Boss, this computer, although it is quite tedious. It's just trying to manage. Oh, here we go. He's up. Here is Ruben.
Well, this time around, it's got to be Mike Yates. He comes in there and does the James Bond thing and makes it work, and it's great.
Well, I get a point for that because I chose Mike Yates before Ruben did, and that's how it works, because I can't choose something after somebody has chosen it because that has been claimed, so that diminishes my choices, but also means I can't get a point for it because the other person has preempted me. But that means if I choose something before somebody else chooses it. Now, obviously, I still lose out on a point because I don't get the point for choosing the same thing this episode. So it's not hugely advantageous. It's not as good as choosing the same thing from the same episode. But I get a point. I think it's my only one. I've got a sneaking suspicion we might both choose the same thing next week. Of course we will. It's going to be Joe's leaving scene, but what about the bonus? Sorry, spoilers. I haven't watched next week's yet, but I can't see anything trumping Joe's leaving scene. It's so beautiful. And so yeah, I'm glad in this episode of Happy Times and Places that Mike Yates' involvement gets a name check, because it's a cliffhanger for a unit peripheral character, not quite peripheral, but supporting lead as opposed to lead. It's Yates. Always when Yates and Benton get something extra, do it. It warms my heart as an actor. That's always, whenever I've been in anything, and any little extra's always been a bit of a bonus. Because I'm familiar with Richard Franklin and John Levine as well, and they've been figures that loomed large in my reading about Doctor Who, and then I've got to meet and work with both of them, so I'm always sort of batting for them, really. And the fact that Yates subplot is a real asset to the story. It shows admirable sort of character arc in a way that we don't necessarily associate with the show in the olden days when reset buttons were a thing and characters you didn't have much of a function outside of the stories, really. But also because he does the espionage well, and it's that bridge between the corporate world and as I say, the incongruity of him representing that when he pops up from behind the desk with the gun in the nut hutch. That makes for a very tense scene, and as I say, one that always surprises me and is a bit unexpected. And because Mike is getting to do, instead of comping around in his fatigues, he's getting to do a bit of the old James Bond undercover stuff, and he gets to do a bit where a shutter comes down and he gets trapped behind it and tells the Doctor to run. I love all of that. Wonderful. So yes, I should have chosen Mike Yates this week, but I was premature. So I wasn't premature with my serendipity, but I was premature with my Captain Mike Yates. But there we go. So that's the end of episode 5 of The Green Death. I hope that you are all well as you listen to this, and that your life is accident-free. But if you do have one, that it's a happy one, appropriate for happy times and places. Cheerio. Well, thank you ever so much for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Hadoke, and my special guest, Ruben Herfindahl, who is on Twitter. Is it still called Twitter when you listen to this in the future? I'm not calling it X. I'm still an Opal Fruits kind of guy. He's at Orax666. I'm grateful to him and to the patrons who make these podcasts possible. And they include Angus Gulliver, Paul Jones, Man in a Skirt Alert, Jim Trenowden, John Molyneux, David Brody, Michael Harvey, Steve Walker, Sarah Crotzer, B. Baker, Jim Mooney, Nick Tedston, Neil Tate, Richard Straw, Gavin McLean, Christopher Meredith, Rob Leonard, Ronald Hayden, Peter Harness, James Curray-Smith, Peter Burns, Stephen Moffat, Rick King Byatt, Tim Arding, Nigel Bromley, Jenny at Blue Box 99, Paul Cook, Richard Chalk, Grant Davidson, John Deere, Chris Dunford Kelk, Paul Dunn, Jason Gorman, Siobhan Galichon, and Chris Hyam. The music is by Dave Gates, the artwork by Dylan Patterson. And if you would like your name read out on the end credits, that is just one of the joys of being a patron. You can sign up at patreon.com/Toby Hadoke, where for as little as £3 a month, you get advance releases, you get bonus material, monthly AMAs, pictures of my dog, some works in progress, some exclusive pictures from projects I've been involved with, many of which are to do with Doctor Who. All that sort of thing is available at patreon.com/Toby Hadoke. £3 a month. I mean, it goes up to as much as you want to pay, but you get everything pretty much at the lowest tier. There are some little trinkets to lure you up the ladder, but the lowest tier gets you all of the horrible word content, all of the audio splurge, and some video too, and pictures of my dog, the most important thing, Bernard, looking like the cockapoo that he is. And you can get 10% off your patronage if you sign up for a year in advance. If you can't do the monthly commitment or simply don't fancy it, but do occasionally like to patronise the arts, which is apparently what this is, you can go to ko-fi.com/Toby Hadoke and throw any amount you like that pretends to be like you're buying me a coffee at ko-fi.com/Toby Hadoke. But I know times are tough. Things are getting even more expensive, I mean, seemingly by the minute. And I'm just grateful to the fact for the fact that you listen to this stuff. But if you enjoy it, please go to iTunes, Podbean, Spotify. See, I'm struggling with all the modern words. See, this is why I need your help. Bring me kicking and screaming into the real world. Well, I'll know how to say things like Dolby Surround and cyberspace and all the other modern things as with alacrity, because I have been taught the ways of modern interaction, which I'm getting used to. But I'll be even better at it if I get loads of good reviews. I don't follow the logic of that at all. But I'll cover over it, Toby. Nobody will notice. Okay, so basically, for no reason other than it really helps to separate these from all the other podcasts out there, if you can give them 5 stars, 5-star ratings, and a few lines of review to say what you like about them, that just really helps tweak the algorithms, make people notice, and get more people listening, which sort of would then justify the time spent on doing them. And, if you're listening this far, you've certainly got something out of it. Otherwise, you're a blooming masochist. And you may as well take your headphones off now and stab yourself in the knee with a fork instead. It's a much more productive use of your time, if you like, inflicting pain upon yourself. That actually don't. Now, let's not encourage people to stab themselves with forks. That would be very irresponsible. You must also not cross the road whilst looking at your phone, stick your face in a fan, or meddle with the ecosystem by producing chemical waste above an ailing Welsh industry. All of these things are bad. So yes, that hopefully will redress the balance from me foolishly and irresponsibly encouraging knee fork interfaces. And you can go onto Twitter and Facebook and follow what I'm up to. I have a Facebook page. I also have Twitter, or X, as I've alluded to the fact that that's what it seems to be called now. But if you type Twitter into your search bar, it still takes you there. I'm still twittering. So, Twitter, I'm at Hadoke Podcasts for these podcasts. I'm at Toby Hadoke for stuff that isn't just about these podcasts. And I'm on Instagram at toby.hadoke, where I'm trying to do lots of videos and be a bit better. So go to Instagram and follow me there, because once I've got requisite followers there, I might then migrate to TikTok. And who knows, one day I'll be a real boy. Well, as I mentioned The Wire, I will let you know that this is my second time through. I'm currently on season 4. I have to admit, when I did it originally, I did it the wrong way around. I did series 1 to 3, and then I think series 5 was on, but series 4 wasn't out on DVD, so I did series 5 and then I did series 4, which was very naughty of me. But now I'm doing it in the proper order, and I've also bought a book which is a sort of oral history of The Wire as well. So I'm having a bit of a deep dive in my spare time, and it's funny that the characters you sort of migrate to the second time around. I was much more interested in the Amsterdam storyline and Robert Wisdom's Bunny Colvin than I had been the first time around. I think because I resented anything that took me away from everything that I knew from season 1 and the characters there that took a while to get established as you acclimatized to the language. So of course, the first time around I didn't like season 2 at all, because suddenly I'm at the docks. You go, what are we doing here? But actually I found that as part of the whole weaving narrative really good, and it's a relevant storyline about the sort of schematics of the city and how the insidiousness of sort of crime and corruption and sort of almost urban and structural and financial decay sort of get in the cracks everywhere, and those characters earn their place. And Chris Bauer comes across very well in the book as well, really interesting and funny and self-deprecating. So yeah, it's much like Doomwatch. Rewatching stuff sometime later, I find interesting things in episodes and characters and situations I'd maybe overlooked, but probably because I go in with low expectations of those and find them more rewarding than perhaps things I'd built up. But that's okay. And I'm sure if I do rewatches in the future, that'll settle, and I'll appreciate everything for what they are rather than for my expectations, which kind of ties in with the Green Death and the Pertwee era and much of Doctor Who. But Wire fans, Major Valchek is a grade A arse. I like he's very good. Al Brown, it's amazing how many of those actors are no longer with us, though, sadly. Some because they were old, and in fact, and some sadly because of drug use and the world that they inhabit. But The Wire, it's like a novel. Some of it quite impenetrable, some of the language very tricky, sprawling number of characters, but it's rewarding. But I have to sort of do it late at night when everyone's in bed and when I feel I've done my obligations, which are things like this. But now that I've done this, I might go and I've got to do some exercise. Well, can I exercise with a bruised potato foot? You see, potato foot. That could be a character in The Wire. Have you seen Potato? Potato Foot was on the corner, but he's disappeared. We overheard him doing a deal. We got to find Potato Foot. Anyway, talking nonsense now, but there we go. If you haven't seen The Wire, I can recommend it. It's not like Doctor Who at all, but it is a superb, superior, and brilliantly made piece of television that has actually, unlike some I think The Wire has aged very well, actually, because maybe its themes are universal, but also its production values are fairly straightforward, and its pace was languid to start with, so it hasn't slowed down any. But it's languid, but it's dense. So it has, it always had a huge depth of content that is as discernible now, perhaps even more so, and not harmed by a change in pace in modern television, because it was slow by the standards of its time, which is very interesting. That I think that element of it is dated better than stuff that perhaps seemed fresher and more immediate. That's interesting. Not to say that Wire didn't seem fresh, but it's certainly sort of dense, and you have to work at it. It's nourishment, and bran flakes are harder to chew than Cocoa Pops. There we go. The Green Death, The Wire, and a breakfast cereal analogy, all in one podcast. That's what you pay the big bucks for.